Morning. Thank you for coming along. Today is an important day in the transition process from the heavy restrictions that South Australia has been under for some time to a more relaxed approach, whilst at the same time ensuring some capability to look after the community of South Australia from a public health point of view. As of today, most activities and venues are able to operate on a ratio of one person per 2 square metres, which is a significant relaxation from the one person per 4 square metres. And large gatherings are also able to occur. Gatherings of over 1,000 people may be approved on the basis that they submit a COVID management plan to SA Health, who will give approval for that particular activity. So this includes all of those larger venues and activities that we have been able to previously enjoy. Adelaide Oval, as an example, will have the potential to be able to operate at 50% capacity of around 25 to 27,000 people. So another significant step forward for South Australia. The new general rule applies to all activities, including fitness activities, fitness classes, even though we are recognising the fact that some of these activities do present a greater risk to the community from the spread of COVID-19. The current status of the virus in South Australia is such that we're able to take this step on the basis that we are prepared to take further steps to provide safety to the community if we do have COVID-19 within the community. Today is also the lead up to changing our border restrictions. We currently only have border restrictions in place for New South Wales, ACT and Victoria, and we are intending to maintain those border restrictions at this point in time, and we are moving to a pre-approval process for people seeking to travel to South Australia. This means that anyone intending to travel will have to visit sa.gov.au, complete a pre-approval application form, and on the basis of the information they provide, they will either be given prior approval to enter South Australia as an essential traveller, or they'll be advised that they must go into 14 days quarantine. Once that process is complete, they'll be given a unique identifying number, which they'll produce at the border, and that will streamline the process for people entering South Australia as of Wednesday. That includes anyone entering from the road or by air into Adelaide Airport. This will provide greater consistency and give people assurances before they leave home in their home state that when they do arrive in Australia, they'll be processed as quickly as possible and they'll have an understanding of their requirements when they reach South Australia.
Is that just for people coming from Victoria, or does that include New South Wales and the ACT as well?
New South Wales, ACT and Victoria will be required, or in fact all people coming from any other jurisdiction in Australia will be required to go online and complete the pre-approval process. If they're coming from a COVID-safe zone like Northern Territory, WA or Tasmania and travelling direct to South Australia, it will be a much simpler process for them, but we still need to record their details and confirm that they haven't travelled from overseas in the prior 14 days.
Why is this changed? I think last week it was just Victorians that were going to need the pre-approval.
No, the pre-approval process applies to anybody entering South Australia, and particularly where we have border restrictions in place, which essentially means the 14-day quarantine obligation. My apologies, Queensland is a COVID-safe zone at the moment, so people travelling from Queensland at this time are not required to go into 14 days quarantine.
Is the essential traveller, has that definition changed at all? Is there any leniency?
There are probably greater refinements to that definition, which makes it more clear for people seeking to obtain essential traveller status. The general rules have not changed. People who are deemed to be essential travellers on the basis of compassionate grounds or medical grounds will be required to quarantine when they're not undertaking those particular activities.
Given the situation in Victoria, can you see the border restrictions being eased on July 20?
We're still aiming for July 20 as the date to remove all restrictions, but given the current activity in Victoria around COVID, we'll be watching very closely. There is no firm commitment to the 20th of July if the circumstances are such that it would create a risk to South Australian residents, and we'll be monitoring that very closely over the next days and weeks.
The AFL's obviously been impacted as early as this weekend with some games being shuffled around. Can you see South Australian teams being allowed to go and play over there anytime soon?
Play over where? Play
In Victoria.
Well, at this point in time, with the South Australian teams being accommodated in Queensland, it's not an issue for us. Their requirement to travel between Queensland and Victoria is a matter for the Queensland government. If the South Australian-based AFL teams intend to return to South Australia, we'll have a look at what the circumstances are at that time in relation to what obligations they may face coming back into South Australia.
So they are due to play in Victoria in round 7.
That's correct. Yeah. So we'll just wait and see where we're at that point in time.
Is there a particular date that you will be working towards before you make that decision for March? Do you need 2 weeks?
Well, we'll take advice from our experts in SA Health in relation to the efforts of Victoria to contain the virus and how successful that's been, and also to properly establish just the extent of its spread in the Victorian community. The reality is the numbers we're seeing today relate to activities that have occurred over the last 2 weeks, so we may see some much better performance in Victoria over the next few days. Time will tell. You may remember back in March we were having numbers in the order of about 30 per day, but that dropped very quickly. So we're hopeful that Victoria see the same performance, because it's important to everybody that Victoria gets this under control, and that's why we've got some health experts sent to Victoria to assist with their contact tracing.
Do you want them just to have low cases or zero?
Beg your pardon?
Do you want them just to have low cases, like 10 and under, or do you need them to be close?
Well, my advice is that COVID-19 is a reality, and it will be within the community for the foreseeable future. So it's an unrealistic expectation to see 0 cases, and I think the messaging to the South Australian community is that we should be prepared to have COVID-19 cases within the South Australian community as well. So it's all about making sure you have effective contact tracing and an ability to rapidly respond to significant outbreaks. We have that in place in South Australia, ready to go. We're hopeful that Victoria can actually demonstrate that they've got that capacity operating now.
You previously mentioned that one of the key metrics you're looking at when it comes to lifting border restrictions is 3 weeks without any community transmission.
Yeah.
Does that apply to Victoria?
We'll take advice from SA Health on this. The indicators that give us the confidence to be able to open borders will come based on how they're performing in managing the virus, but we'll take advice from SA Health. That's the predominant piece of information that we're looking for, is what SA Health think is a safe level for us to operate on.
What is the status of the virus in South Australia at the moment? Have we eliminated it?
Well, for all intents and purposes, I think we have eliminated the virus in South Australia, but that doesn't mean that it can't find its way in. We do need people to enter South Australia for critical purposes such as freight delivery, essential business purposes, national security. So people who do come into South Australia potentially carry the virus with them. So we still have those mechanisms in place to properly handle that event should it occur. The elimination position that we find ourselves in now was probably not one that was intended. It was always the case that we would be aiming to suppress the virus, so our health system could properly accommodate those people who are affected by COVID-19. We still hold that position. Elimination is probably an unlikely outcome in the long term.
Do you expect any cases to pop up locally from today with the significant relaxing of restrictions?
Well, I think the current circumstances in South Australia lend us to, or enable us to take a step forward in terms of relaxing activities within South Australia, so businesses can trade more effectively and hopefully create more employment. The risk for South Australia does arise from people entering South Australia carrying COVID-19, and we're doing as much as we can to mitigate that risk, but it cannot be eliminated.
I think it's likely that on July 20, the baptism border opens in Victoria, perhaps not those hotspots.
There is some conversation about having restrictions for people who travel from hotspots, but there are some logistics issues that make that very challenging, so we're just working through that at the moment.
There's a Black Lives Matter protest scheduled for this weekend. Are you aware of that, and how many are expected, and what can we put in place for that?
As we've said before, there will be appropriate times for these types of public rallies to occur. With the new arrangements that are in place, such a rally could be conducted safely and in accordance with the current level of restrictions. So hopefully we can work with the organisers to make sure it's as safe as possible for everybody involved.
So is that the kind of event that is going to attract more than 1,000 people? They need approval from SAL for that?
Exactly right. Any organised event that attracts more than 1,000 people will need a COVID management plan approved by SA Health.
And what's the go with, say, Hindley Street venues with dance floors and people very close together under the new restrictions? What's happening with those?
Nightclubs are included in this current level of restrictions being relaxed, but it's important to point out that nightclub activity is seen as a potential for significant spread of the virus were it to be present in the community. So there will be expectations on operators of venues that would be constituting a nightclub to seek prior approval from SA Health under the form of a COVID management plans to demonstrate how they are going to conduct their business in a safe way.
Do you know if any of those management plans from nightclubs have been submitted and approved?
I'm not sure if any have been submitted. I know that SA Health are working quite significantly to liaise with the sector that is involved so they can develop a plan which is going to meet their requirements and give them the information they need to make a decision on how they should operate. I don't know that any have been submitted yet.
Is it realistic to think that teenagers drinking and dancing will be able to behave in a way that might essentially contribute to the spread?
Well, without any type of control, I think it's unrealistic to expect that young people in that sort of environment would have the capacity to maintain the social distancing requirements and to abide by the 1 person per 2 square metre rule. The rule is not simply just a mathematical calculation that allows a venue to open. It is on the basis that by reducing a venue's capacity to operate by about 50%, you're increasing space between patrons. So the venue operators will have to demonstrate to SA Health how they are going to ensure that that space requirement is maintained. That's not a matter for the South Australia Police, it is a matter for the venue operators to show SA Health how they can do that.
Considering, as far as you're aware, none of those management plans have been submitted yet by nightclubs, let alone
Yep.
approved, would you anticipate then that Harley Street should still be pretty quiet this week?
I would imagine so. It will take some time for SA Health to work through these plans, but I do know that they're intending to work with the sector. They're liaising with the Hotels Association as well so that we can provide as much information to the sector as possible and they can meet their obligations under this particularly unique set of circumstances.
It's the end of our restrictions or
No, well, the 1 person per 2 square metre rule essentially puts a 50% cap on most venues' capacity to operate, so we still have some way to go. The reason for maintaining it at 50% rather than allowing full trading is the acknowledgement that COVID-19 can potentially find its way back into the South Australian community. We want to minimise the full extent of movement throughout the community to a certain extent, but also give us the ability to act quickly if we do find the virus coming into effect and take steps to eliminate it again.
Sorry, one last question, please.
Sorry, just to gel glasses, police are now treating them as firearms. Can you run me through what that actually means?
We've provided advice to the Minister for Police that based on a ballistics assessment, gel blasters meet the definition of a firearm, which means there needs to be some regulation around their importation and sale. We're still working through that process and we'll provide further information to the Minister, but anyone who's had an opportunity to see a gel blaster will appreciate it's not just about its technical classification as a firearm, but there are lots of circumstances where they've been used to threaten and intimidate people because of their lifelike appearance.
So can they no longer be imported into South Australia?
At the moment, the importation of gel blasters is on hold, but it'll be on the basis of the advice we provide to the Minister in terms of the longer-term prospects. There are only 2 jurisdictions in Australia that currently allow the importation of gel blasters. It's us and Queensland, and we're taking this very seriously as we step through this.
Commissioner, just on another topic, yesterday's fatal collision was the 11th motorcycle death in our roads this year. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't think it's any surprise to hear that motorcycle riders constitute a vulnerable road user group. It's a concern that continually presents itself every year. Any fatality on our roads is a tragic loss, and we try and work as closely as possible with high-risk groups to make sure they're mindful of the risks they're taking and that they use the roads as safely as possible. But it's, along with others, pedestrians, bicycle riders, they are a vulnerable road user group, and there is a risk associated with that.
Are you worried that the number of fatals will increase as restrictions lift and more people are out and about? Is that a concern?
The current numbers we're seeing around lives lost on our roads year to date puts us below where we were the same time last year. Last year was a terrible year for road fatalities, so we'll watch closely, but we've already seen significant increases in the volume of road users since we had the heavier restrictions. So we're hopeful that the patterns we're seeing now are indicative of the way forward for us. So we'd like to see people using our roads safely and responsibly, and we'll be taking action where we identify risk activity.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Just
One
back
more.
on gel glasses, I just want to ask you, is it because we've seen a spike in incidents and the pedestrians hit injuries, is that why that you consider is that they are now so
We've been looking at gel blasters for some time and continually updating our ballistic assessment as the product changes and becomes more sophisticated. But the use of gel blasters in the community is also a significant concern to us, and the recent injuries and threats to people highlights that for us. Thank you.
Have you got any updates, sorry, on whether speed was a factor in yesterday's crash?
It's too early for me to make any comment about the cause for the fatal crash yesterday. Thank you.